It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA.
Good morning, I'm Brian O'Neill. Longtime WLEA WCKR owner Kevin Dorn died of leukemia yesterday. Evening Tribune reporter Jason Jordan, who Kevin spoke very highly of. Jordan tweeted he was sorry to hear that reporter Kevin Dorn had passed away. WLEA sales manager Tom Booth said Kevin Dorn did talk radio for Hornell long before talk radio was a full-time radio format nationwide. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about Kevin Dorn being on the radio is that wonderful voice.
This is Kevin Dorn.
He had the most wonderful voice, and what you call in radio voice consistency, meaning no matter what year it was, what decade it was, what century, he pretty much always sounded the same on and off the air. Kevin Dorn started in radio at WLEA in his mid-teens in the 1950s. Eileen O'Toole, one of Kevin's Dublin cousins, once said about Kevin's father, William Dorn, and she said this applied to Kevin too, that William Dorn, who was an alderman at one point in Hornell, William Dorn was comfortable in mixing with all levels of government and people. While Kevin Dorn was a student at Loras College, he interviewed National Review founder William F. Buckley. He also worked at Dubuque, Iowa radio station WDBQ, where he was well known as an on-air personality, pulling pranks like calling the Washington Monument and President Lincoln's descendants, the Sands nightclub in Las Vegas, getting celebrities on the telephone. Humorous pranks were Kevin Dorn's trademark at WDBQ in Iowa. Probably the biggest story Kevin ever covered in his years at WLEA was the flood of 1972, where Kevin Dorn worked tirelessly for days on the air, passing along information about the storms and taking calls from local officials and volunteers who helped out during the flood. Also getting reports from those at the scene on the different streets and towns and areas during the June 1972 flood. Other major local stories Kevin Dorn and the WLEA reporters, Joy Gilmore, Steve Gregory, Jonathan Marr, covered were the changes at St. James Hospital in the early 1970s when the hospital went from being diocesan-run to being privately controlled. Other big stories include the closing of Bethesda Hospital in the mid-1980s. Audio here from the then State Health Department spokesman, Peter Slocum.
Health Department today served an order on the hospital requiring them to close entirely for a period of 60 days because of the imminent danger to the health and welfare of patients that we have determined exists at the facility. The hospital has a right to request a hearing to contest that order from the commissioner, but the reason the commissioner acted is because of our investigation of a medication error.
Other notable stories covered by Dorn and his staff at WLEA throughout the decades include the Eric Smith-Derek Roby case, countless political campaigns and elections, the 2014-15 changes at St. James Hospital in Hornell. The list goes on and on. Frequent local guests on the Newsmaker show over the years were the late Dr. Joseph McCormick, Dr. Spencer Annabelle, Alfred University professors Dr. Robert Heinemann and Dr. Gary Ostrower. Long-distance guests from the college world included Gannon University professor of philosophy Dr. Joseph LaFaro, and in later years, Dr. Christian Koff, University of Colorado in Boulder. Often Kevin Dorn would speak with local clergymen like the Reverend David Salico. Social issues were a topic often covered by Dorn, and here he is in a 1985 interview with the Reverend Salico.
People are marrying later. On a whole, they're waiting longer to marry. Basically, people do wait longer to get married.
That was the Reverend David Salico interview there from August 16th, 1985 on WLEA. Another frequent guest in what Kevin liked to call the WLEA bullpen was Alfred University professor Dr. Savile Yerima.
Dr. Savile Yerima is with us, a former resident of Yugoslavia, has never lost his interest in the spread of communism, not promoting it, rather, but in observing it. Savile, so far, I think we could sum up your position as follows, that the United States acted prudently by moving in there. If they did not move into Grenada, the Cubans would continue to take one island after the other in the Caribbean, and at some point, someone had to do something. So, if that's a correct understanding of what you said so far. Is that okay? Let's move ahead. Let's talk about public opinion. Now, world reaction, predictably the communists are upset, but many of our Eastern allies are too. Does that surprise and or disappoint you?
Well, I merely hope that the disappointment that we hear that's on the part of our Western allies and so on is more for essentially public consumption, I put it like that, and it does not indicate real disappointment, I might put it like that. After all, the island is part of the British Commonwealth, and the British, I guess, were not consulted in great detail about the American moves, and I can understand that they would have become somewhat angry and would have to voice a certain amount of disapproval.
Kevin Dorn with Dr. Savile Yerima. And for the last 30 years, Dr. Robert Heinemann was a frequent guest on the Newsmaker show, appearing on Friday mornings. The shows with Kevin Dorn and Dr. Robert Heinemann were known for the good-natured kidding back and forth.
Ann Coulter, not one of your favorite people.
That would be true, yes.
Ann Coulter had a thing on drugs.
The woman.
Would you please?
Go ahead.
Ann Coulter had a thing on Drudge yesterday, or he ran something she wrote, saying, and Pat Buchanan agreed by it.
Oh, there we go. Well,
yeah, well,
I like Pat Buchanan.
The real Republicans. You ought to. I gave you my seat so you could talk to him.
He was very generous.
Well, I know it. Well, he's a nice guy. But here's the thing. They believe, Coulter and Buchanan, that if Boehner caves in to big business and passes an immigration bill to increase the number of Democrats and also cheap labor to help big business, that he's done, that the Republicans will then revolt. Now, I know you're a big fan of Boehner. I think he's probably a very decent guy. But someone's got to stand up and say, no.
About as simple-minded as you can get.
I beg your pardon? Are you calling me simple-minded or Coulter and Buchanan?
Yeah. No, I think you picked up on that, Kevin, yeah. I think that...
And the shows with Dr. Robert Heinemann always ended on a humorous note.
Oh, that's the approach that devout Republicans do not take.
Now, the way it worked was always on Fridays, Dr. Robert Heinemann, always on Thursdays, Dr. Christian Koff.
I don't care. You're going to have to placate the real conservatives in the Republican Party. So,
well, their attitude is that we can stay home, and they're going to get all these, natural conservatives on the illegal immigrants who are family-loving, hard-working, and are never going to vote Republican in our generation.
Kevin Dorn, he also liked to talk with high-level media figures. It was 28 years ago to the day. On October 21st, 1983, 28 years before Kevin Dorn passed away, that Kevin Dorn interviewed the editor of Newsweek about communist intelligence activities in the United States during the Cold War years.
What about the peace movement? Now, 40 miles from here tomorrow, there will be 5,000 people out demonstrating against American nuclear weapons. What is your view on the peace movement? Who's controlling that?
Well, the peace movement, I respect the millions of people who are out there demonstrating for a freeze and for peace. These are very laudable sentiments. What I do not understand is why we are not told what the Europeans have been told by their media, and that is the degree of manipulation by the World Peace Council and its offshoots, national offshoots like the U.S. Peace Council. It has 137 branches all over the world, and other Communist Front organizations that are heavily involved in the peace movement and coordinate things on both sides of the Atlantic.
Arnold the Borg Roth there, the former Newsweek editor, talking with Kevin Dorn back on October 21st, 1983. Fast forwarding to 1992, when Kevin spoke with former President Ronald Reagan spokesman Lynn Nofsinger.
The
impression that Reagan worried about all the details of government. He didn't, and deliberately, he didn't think that was his job.
He sort of set the course and then moved it and gave it to delegates, right?
Well, that's right, and, made the tough decisions and was there when he had to be, but the idea I always contrast him to Jimmy Carter. When Jimmy Carter first came into office, he literally kept the schedule on his desk of who played tennis on the White House tennis court. Right. Well, that's not the job of the president, and Reagan understood that instinctively.
Now, in the first administration, what exactly was your position?
I was the assistant to the president for political affairs.
That's a very important job. You must see the president a great deal in a job like that.
Well, you see him as often as you want to. One of the things that I've always thought in this business is you don't go bother somebody who has other things on his mind. And while politics is important to getting the job done and so forth, it's not a policy job. I wasn't in there trying to steer him toward how you handle Nicaragua or anything like that. Our job was to make sure that he got the support when he needed it.
In the early 1990s, Kevin Dorn took some time off from work and did some community theater, playing the part of President Franklin Roosevelt in the Hornell Rotary first production of Annie, also the Rotary Club's production of My Fair Lady, where he was Professor Henry Higgins. On that play, Dorn used to work on memorizing the lines of My Fair Lady by putting himself on a cassette and listening to that cassette repeatedly.
Simple phonetics, the science of speech. That's my profession, also my hobby. Anyone can spot an Irishman or Yorkshireman by his brogue.
And Kevin had a lot of fun in the summer plays that he was in. I'm Brian O'Neill, and it's the Newsmaker Show today, October 22nd, a Thursday. Normally, Dr. Christian Koff is our guest, but today we wanted to talk about the life and radio career of Kevin Dorn. Kevin Dorn, the owner of and longtime WLEA personality going back to the 1950s. He passed away Wednesday, October 21st, after a 22-year fight against chronic leukemia. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Brian O'Neill on the Newsmaker Show, and talking today about the life of Kevin Dorn and the radio career of Kevin Dorn. You know, up until the end, he had a great sense of humor, something that was ever evident.
One thing I can tell you, this one thing that he used to joke with people a lot with, if he had a sense that they were scripted, he would kid him about that right on the air, and often it was a sponsor who was a friend of his who just wrote down some notes, and Kevin would start joking around about it.
Punch up 80, please.
Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Kevin.
How are you this morning?
Well, I'm good. The weather's terrible.
Isn't it terrible? Yeah. Let's talk about it a bit.
I hate talking about the weather when it's bad.
It really is.
But I'd rather talk about...
Yes? You've got a script there, Carolyn, haven't you? You're
going
to read that whatever I say.
As a matter of fact.
You're going to read that whatever I say.
No, I don't have anything to read. I really don't.
And some of the best radio was when Kevin had Santa Claus on as a guest.
It's time now for WLEA's opinion program, Sound Off. Good morning. We're on Sound Off this morning. Today we're going to be talking to Santa Claus live from the North Pole, and I think we have our long-distance operator got in touch with the North Pole. Good morning.
Merry Christmas. This is the North Pole.
Yes, is this Mrs. Claus?
It is. Is this Tim Higdon?
Yes, we're calling from Hornell, New York. We talked to you the other day. We'd like to talk to Santa Claus if that's possible. I know he's busy.
He is very busy, Mr. Higdon, but he's very busy, but he's expecting your call.
Okay, let's, can you please get him? We'll
Who's this?
Santa!
Santa Claus here.
Santa, this is Tim down in New York.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir.
Merry Christmas, Jim, to you and all the people at WELA there.
That's WLEA, sir.
Yeah, sure. How are you, boy?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. I know you're busy, but I want to...
Why, boy, you don't know what busy is when you've been Santa Claus on Christmas Eve.
Well, I'm glad you could spare a little...
Son, I can't hear you.
I said I'm glad you could spare a few minutes with us on this very busy day.
Well, it's not so much you, Sonny, as the boys and girls.
Okay, well,
I can't hear you, Jim. You've got to speak up.
we're gonna try and have them call you. We're gonna take a few telephone calls from some of the boys and girls out there.
How are they going to reach me here at the pole?
Well, we have a conference hookup, and they can call 324-6211 if they'd like to talk to Santa Claus this morning.
Oh, well, good.
Okay, Santa, I'm going to have to put you on hold for 1 second.
Son, I can't hear you.
I say I'm going to have to put you on hold 1 second for a quick commercial, all right? Yeah, commercial.
We don't do commercials.
No, we don't want you to do the commercial. You just hold on from the North Pole. 324-6211 if you'd like to talk to Santa Claus this morning.
And you're listening to Santa Claus on Kevin Dorn's Sound Off Show. We'll skip past that commercial and return to the Sound Off Show here from the 1970s.
We're back with Santa Claus. Sarah, this is Sarah from Hornell. You'd like to talk to Santa Claus?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Santa, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, Santa.
Oh, Sarah. How are you, honey?
Good.
Well, now, I got your letter, I think. Did you send me a letter this year, Sarah?
I don't know. Just a minute. Mom. No, we can get out. That's why I want to talk to you.
Oh, well, it's a good thing.
Sarah, I didn't think I'd gotten your letter.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Sarah. What do you want, sweetheart?
I want a pair. I want some boots.
What was that first thing, honey?
Boots.
All right, boots. All right.
I want a shirt.
Shirt, all right.
And pants.
Want all clothes, huh?
And I want a pair of gloves.
Gloves, all right.
A teddy bear.
Oh, good. I was hoping you want that teddy bear. All right, okay.
And then I want, let's see, a baby, like your tears baby, it's a doll.
Okay, honey.
Okay, Sarah.
Sarah, we'll do the best we can, honey. Now, you be good. Very sure.
I said hi.
Oh, and listen, Sarah, don't wait up and try to catch me, because no one's ever done it. Bye-bye, Sarah.
Bye, Sarah. Thank you for calling.
Jim.
Yes, Tim.
More youngsters down there, Jim?
Yes, Santa, I think we do. They're calling us on 324-6211 this morning. Any of the youngsters.
Oh, just a moment. The reindeer are acting up. Hold on.
Okay. The reindeer are acting up there. All right, let's take another phone call. Good morning.
This is Andrew.
Andrew.
Dorn.
How you doing, Andy?
Good.
What can I do for you?
What do I want?
Yeah, something like that.
Let me see here.
You got a list there, Andrew?
No, but I know what I want.
What can I do?
This way hopefully it goes up at the top.
That's it. Top.
And, let me see. Where's that page? Some Star Wars people.
Star Wars? All right. Star Wars.
Chip. The Incredible Hulk.
Holy buckets. Andrew, give my best to your daddy and your mommy and all your wonderful brothers and sisters there. All right.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See him somewhere by your radio station.
I think you should. You sound like a radio star here. Okay, Santa.
That was Santa Claus on Kevin Dorn's show. I'm Brian O'Neill, and I want to thank you for listening to our tribute here on the Newsmaker show to longtime station owner Kevin Dorn, who passed away from chronic leukemia yesterday. ABC is next on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.